My name is Charlotte, and I still remember the night that shattered everything I thought I knew about marriage. Imagine this. You are at a candlelit table, roses everywhere, crystal glasses catching the light. 45 friends and family gathered to celebrate your second wedding anniversary. You have been planning this night for weeks, determined to prove you belong in this family. And then, instead of a toast to love and loyalty, your father-in-law rises with a smug smile. Since you failed to provide us with an heir, here is your anniversary gift, he declares. The room stills. He holds out an envelope. My hands tremble as I open it. Inside, legal documents, divorce papers. My anniversary gift is abandonment. I look to my husband Timothy, the man I thought would stand beside me through every storm. He turns his face away, unable to meet my eyes. My mother-in-law smiles and gestures toward the doorway, a young woman barely 25 steps forward in a silk dress. Meet Judith, she says. Timothy's new wife. The laughter, the wine, the music, all of it blurs into a cruel theater. Every face at the table watches me like spectators at an execution. I can feel their breath on my skin as they wait for me to crack. My chest tightens. My heart slams against my ribs like a drum. But I do not scream. I do not beg. With hands that no longer feel like my own, I pick up the pen Mason offers, and I sign. The scratching of ink across paper is louder than any applause. Louder than any congratulations whispered to Judith. Louder than the sound of my own soul breaking. In that instant, my world collapses. The vows I believed in. The family I tried so hard to please. The marriage I fought for. Gone with a stroke of a pen. Yet, what no one knows, not even me at that moment, is that the script they wrote for my humiliation is about to turn upside down. Because sitting just a few feet away, my best friend Erica has been waiting, holding something powerful. Something that will make this entire room gasp for breath. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up signing away my marriage in front of an audience, I need to take you back. Back to the beginning of that day. Back to the breakfast that should have been sweet, but tasted like ash. Back to the first tremors that warned me the ground beneath my marriage was already cracking. Stay with me, because the night my in-laws tried to erase me was also the night I found a strength I never knew I carried. But before I continue, I want to ask you something. If you believe no woman should ever be humiliated for failing to meet someone else's expectations, tell me where you're watching from in the comments and subscribe so more people can hear stories like this. This community matters. Your voice matters. Now let me take you to the morning of my anniversary, the morning everything began to unravel. I had just signed the papers. My hand was still shaking when I slid the pen back across the table. Applause broke out, laughter even from the people I had called family. Timothy sat frozen, pale as a ghost, while his parents beamed as if they had finally completed a business transaction they had been planning for months. And then silence. A single voice cut through the noise. Don't sign anything else. Not yet. It was Erica, my best friend, my anchor. She rose from her chair near the back of the room, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with fury. Everyone turned, the clinking of glasses falling silent, the smug smiles evaporating. She clutched her purse with both hands, her knuckles white as though she had been waiting for this exact moment. I blinked at her through a blur of tears. Erica. My voice cracked, barely audible above the heavy air pressing down on me. She stepped forward slowly, deliberately, like someone walking into battle. Since we are giving gifts tonight, she said, her voice steady, I have one too. The room shifted instantly. Whispers rippled through the guests. Mason's satisfied smirk faltered. Sharon's hand froze on Judith's shoulder, her knuckles stiffening like claws. Even Timothy's eyes darted nervously between his father and Erica, as if he already knew what was about to unfold. Erica reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope. Not elegant, not gilded, just plain paper. But the way she held it made it feel heavier than the entire dining room. She walked past me, past the untouched desserts, until she stood directly in front of Mason. Then, with a small smile, sharper than a blade, she placed it on the table, right in front of him. Open it, she said simply. Mason's jaw tightened. He was not used to being challenged, not in his home, not in front of his guests. Young lady, this is not the time. No, Erica interrupted her tone, slicing the air clean. This is exactly the time, because Catherine deserves the truth, and all of you deserve to hear it. The guests leaned forward, their curiosity outweighing their discomfort. Mason hesitated, then tore the envelope open with jerky fingers. As his eyes scanned the single sheet inside, I watched his face drain of color. The same man who had just gloated over my humiliation now looked as though the ground had vanished beneath him. "What does it say?" Sharon demanded, her voice trembling. Mason's lips parted, but no sound came out. His hands shook. The paper rattled like dry leaves in the wind. Finally, he whispered, "It's a pregnancy test." His voice broke, positive. A gasp erupted around the table. My tears froze on my cheeks. My chest felt like it might explode. Erica's voice rang out clear and merciless. 48 hours ago, Catherine's blood test confirmed she is pregnant. She is carrying your grandchild, the heir you just claimed she could never give you. The room collapsed into stunned silence. Judith's triumphant smile vanished. Timothy staggered backward, his chair scraping against the hardwood. Sharon's hand dropped from Judith's shoulder as though burned. And Mason, the patriarch, the man who had orchestrated my public execution, looked like a man staring into his own grave. I drew in a long breath. The humiliation that had strangled me minutes earlier now burned into something else. Fury, power, dignity. I wiped my tears and forced myself to meet Mason's eyes. "Congratulations," I said quietly, but every syllable cut like glass. "You just gave away your grandchild." The silence that followed was unbearable. No music, no clinking of glasses. Just the truth, heavy and undeniable, sitting in the middle of that table like a bomb that had finally exploded. Before I go on, let me ask you something. If you were sitting at that table, would you have spoken up like Erica did, or stayed silent with the rest? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe no woman should ever be silenced in her own marriage, hit subscribe now. Together, we make sure these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Because this was only the beginning. The shift of power that night changed everything. And the man who once called himself my husband was about to find out what true consequences looked like. The night of humiliation would not have shocked me so deeply if not for the way the morning had begun. That day had started with peace, sunlight filtering through lace curtains, the smell of coffee and maple syrup. It had felt like the calm before a storm I did not see coming. I woke before dawn, too excited to sleep. 2 years of marriage, it felt like a milestone proof that Timothy and I had built something worth celebrating. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. In the kitchen, I whisked pancake batter and fried turkey bacon until it was just the way he liked, crispy at the edges. The air filled with the comforting scent of vanilla butter and fresh orange juice I had squeezed the night before. I remember smiling as I arranged blueberries into a little heart shape on top of his stack of pancakes. It was silly, but anniversaries are about gestures, about showing you still care. I wore his old sweatshirt, my hair tied back loosely. My wedding ring caught the glow of the early street lamp outside. As I spun it around my finger, an old habit when I wanted reassurance. Timothy appeared in the doorway. My heart lifted, waiting for him to cross the room, kiss me, and say happy anniversary the way he had a year earlier. Instead, he paused, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said flatly, his voice almost bored. 2 years. Something in his tone chilled me. The rustle of the newspaper as he sat down felt like a wall slamming shut between us. He buried himself in the pages, ignoring the pancakes, ignoring me. The silence pressed heavy. At first I told myself it was just nerves, men don't always show excitement the way women do. He probably felt pressure about the party later. But deep down, a small voice whispered something is wrong. I carried our breakfast to the table, but the heart I had made with blueberries looked foolish under the weight of his indifference. I tried to laugh it off. "Happy anniversary, Tim," I said softly. He gave me a thin smile, his eyes never leaving the newsprint. I forced myself to sip coffee, but the warmth did nothing to soothe the cold knot forming in my stomach. I studied his face, searching for signs of stress, guilt, anything. Instead, he acted like I wasn't there. Looking back, that morning was the first real crack in the glass. The beginning of the collapse I had refused to admit was coming. Later that day, I threw myself into decorating the dining room for the party. Mason and Sharon supervised as always. Sharon fluttered around the table, pretending to help while actually criticizing every decision I made. Mason sat like a general in his armchair, his words measured, his gaze sharp. 2 years is long enough for evaluation, he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. At the time, I thought he meant marriage milestones. Now I know he meant something else. Their energy was electric, too eager, too rehearsed. But I was too desperate for approval to see the warning signs. I kept telling myself that if I just made everything perfect, they would finally accept me as one of their own. That morning's breakfast stayed with me, though. The silence, the distance, the strange way Timothy's eyes slid away from mine. Something had shifted, and I could feel it even if I could not yet name it. And yet I kept moving forward, pouring coffee, setting plates, planning the evening as if love could be measured in crystal glasses and roses. I was building a stage for my own betrayal. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever felt it, a silence heavier than words, a change in someone you love, that you cannot explain? If you have, share your story in the comments. And if you believe no one should ignore those early warning signs, hit subscribe. Stories like mine matter because they remind us not to dismiss our intuition. The morning of my second anniversary should have been filled with joy. Instead, it was filled with omens I pretended not to see. And when the evening came, those omens revealed themselves in ways I could never have imagined. By the afternoon, the dining room looked like a magazine spread. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the chandelier. Fresh roses filled the air with their perfume. Every detail was polished to perfection, and I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this night would be remembered for love, not judgment. But Mason and Sharon had different plans. Sharon circled the room like a queen inspecting her court. She adjusted napkins, moved vases half an inch, criticized the caterer's timing, all with that polite smile that hid her blade-sharp words. A second anniversary, she said sweetly, is a chance to evaluate progress. Progress. She spoke as though my marriage was a business venture, rather than a commitment between two hearts. Mason leaned back in his leather chair, watching me arrange flowers. 2 years provides adequate time, he declared in his booming voice. A marriage should demonstrate results by now, real results. His eyes flicked to my stomach, and my breath caught in my chest. Results. They didn't mean love. They meant children. I had endured this for months, their pointed remarks about babies, their endless comparisons to other families. Margaret's daughter had just given birth. The Johnsons were welcoming their second grandchild. Every conversation, every dinner carried the same refrain. Where is your contribution? Where is your heir? I smiled through the pressure, pretending their words didn't land like knives. I told myself they only wanted what was best. But inside, I felt like a project under review, as if my worthiness as a wife could be reduced to biology and timelines. Timothy never defended me. He sat through their jabs in silence, nodding, sipping his wine. His indifference was worse than their cruelty. It told me that in his mind they were right. That day, as we folded napkins together, Sharon leaned close, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It must be hard, Catherine, seeing so many young couples already blessed with children. But don't lose hope. Perhaps with more effort you'll succeed. I froze, my fingers trembling on the linen. More effort, as if my entire being wasn't already consumed by the effort to please them. As if I hadn't cried myself to sleep on nights when another month passed with nothing to show. Still, I kept arranging, polishing, smiling. I told myself that tonight's party would prove me valuable, prove that I belonged. I ignored the dread pressing against my ribs. Looking back, their words were not careless. They were strategic. Every remark was a rehearsal for the public spectacle they had planned. They wanted me to feel small, inadequate, disposable. And they succeeded, at least for a time. I remember setting down a vase of roses and catching Mason watching me. His smile was tight, deliberate. In that moment, I understood this wasn't a celebration. It was an evaluation, and I was failing. But here's the truth I wish I had known then. A marriage is not a contract for producing heirs. It is not a performance review where your value is measured by milestones. It is supposed to be love, respect, partnership, and if those things are missing, nothing else can replace them. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone was grading your life, judging your worth, based on standards you never agreed to? If you have, tell me in the comments. And if you believe no woman should ever be treated as a project instead of a person, hit subscribe now. These stories reach more people because of you. That afternoon, I thought I was preparing a table for family. In reality, I was preparing a courtroom where my future would be judged. And the verdict, though not yet spoken, was already written. The evening unfolded like a carefully scripted play, except I was the only one who hadn't been handed the script. Guests began arriving, their voices bright, their smiles wide, but there was something behind their eyes, something heavy. At first I brushed it off. Anniversaries often stir emotion, I told myself. But as more people filtered into the room, I noticed the subtle changes. Hugs lasted too long, compliments landed oddly like rehearsed lines. "You look radiant tonight, Catherine," someone whispered, squeezing my hands. "So brave. Brave." That word clung to me like a warning bell. The dining room glowed with the golden light of chandeliers, the table, a masterpiece of silverware, roses, and crystal. I should have been proud. Instead, I felt like I was standing on stage, waiting for the curtain to rise on a tragedy. My Aunt Patricia pulled me aside near the fireplace. Her hands, warm and weathered, clasped mine tightly. "Are you feeling well, dear?" she asked, her gaze sharp, searching. "You look pale." "Just excited," I replied with a forced laugh. "Anniversary nerves." She didn't smile. Instead, she leaned in, lowering her voice. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me." Her words rattled inside me. Why would she say that? Why tonight? Before I could ask, Timothy appeared, his hand on my elbow, steering me away. His smile was stiff, his grip unyielding. Throughout the cocktail hour, his distance grew more obvious. He avoided my touch. He dodged questions about our marriage with vague remarks. When guests asked about children, he changed the subject so quickly it left the air awkward and cold. It was as though he was bracing himself for something. And the others, they knew. I could see it in their sidelong glances and the whispers that stopped abruptly when I approached. I felt like the only actor unaware of the ending. The meal itself was exquisite. Course after course was served with elegance. Laughter rose and fell. But beneath it all, there was a current I could not ignore. When I lifted my glass to sip wine, I caught Mason watching me, his lips curved in a smile that seemed too satisfied. Sharon's eyes glowed with anticipation, like a child holding a secret too long. I tried to anchor myself in small details, the shimmer of candlelight, the aroma of roasted lamb, the clink of silver against china. But every sound, every movement felt magnified, pressing against my chest. The dessert arrived, chocolate mousse, my favorite. I should have been delighted. Instead, my stomach nodded. Sharon rose her chair, scraping across the floor. "We have such a wonderful surprise for you, Catherine," she announced. The words were sweet, but her tone made my skin crawl. A surprise. Yes, I realized. This entire night was building toward one, and I was its target. I forced a smile, my hands trembling as I reached for my glass. Guests leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with anticipation, pity, or both. It was no celebration. It was a spectacle, a stage designed for my downfall. Let me pause here. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone knew something you didn't? That suffocating sense of being the only one out of the loop. Share your story in the comments, I want to hear it. And if you believe no one deserves to be humiliated under the disguise of family tradition, subscribe. Your voice ensures these truths aren't buried. That night I realized too late. The dinner I had worked so hard to perfect was not meant to honor me. It was meant to break me. And the performance was only beginning. 3 weeks before the anniversary party, I stumbled across the first undeniable crack in our marriage. I was sorting through a pile of bills at the kitchen counter, preparing for tax season. Insurance statements, utility invoices, bank letters, all routine. Then, tucked between them, I found something that did not belong. A cell phone statement. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The letterhead was the same as our family's wireless company, but the account number was different. My hands stilled a tremor running through my fingers as I unfolded the pages. And then I saw it line after line of calls and text messages. Hundreds. All directed to one number I did not recognize. My stomach tightened. The dates told their own story. Late-night conversations at midnight while he was supposedly asleep beside me. Lunchtime calls when he claimed to be too busy to answer mine. Weekend texts during moments he had sworn he was checking work emails. The frequency had grown steadily over the last 3 months. Whoever this was, she had become important enough to steal hours of his life away from me. I waited for him that evening. The bills lay spread across the counter like evidence in a trial. When Timothy walked through the door, loosening his tie, I held the papers in trembling hands. "Can you explain this?" I asked, my voice calm, though my heart thundered. His face shifted, confusion, recognition, guilt, and then anger. "You went through my personal papers." "They were mixed in with our tax documents," I replied firmly. "I wasn't snooping. I was organizing." He snatched the papers from my hand, scanning them quickly. "This is work-related," he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "My boss requires a separate line for confidential projects." "Your boss requires midnight phone calls," I asked quietly. "Your boss needs you texting during dinner with me." His jaw tightened, his eyes hardening. "You're being paranoid, Catherine. This suspicious behavior, this constant questioning is exactly why we have problems." The words hit me like a slap. Problems. Until that moment, I hadn't known we were broken. My voice trembled. "What problems, Timothy? I don't understand what's happening here." He shook his head, frustration etched across his face. "Everything has to be about you, doesn't it? Every move I make, every person I talk to, you interrogate me. It's suffocating." With that, he grabbed his keys. The slam of the front door echoed through the house, leaving me standing in silence with nothing but the damning phone bill in my hand. That night I sat alone at the kitchen table. The lamp cast a yellow pool of light across the counter, illuminating the evidence of his betrayal. A truth I could not deny stared back at me. My husband was keeping secrets. And he had grown so skilled at deception, it was beginning to feel professional. The blueberry pancakes I had once made for him, the carefully polished tableware, the endless effort to win approval from his family, all of it suddenly felt like theater. I was performing in a play where the ending had already been written, and I was the only one who hadn't read the script. Let me ask you something. If you found phone records like that, would you confront immediately, or wait for more proof? Share your thoughts below. And if you believe every spouse deserves honesty rather than manipulation, hit subscribe. Together we can make sure stories like this are heard. Looking back, that phone bill was more than just a piece of paper. It was the first fracture in the glass facade of my marriage. The first sign that everything I believed in was about to collapse. And though I didn't know it yet, the number on that bill belonged to a woman who would soon stand in my dining room smiling at the wreckage she helped create. 2 days after the phone bill confrontation, I wandered the aisles of the local grocery store trying to quiet the unease gnawing inside me. I was selecting vegetables for dinner when I felt someone staring. I turned and saw her. She was beautiful in that effortless way that makes you instantly self-conscious. Smooth hair, perfect posture, clothes that looked like they belonged on a runway, not in a produce aisle. Her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that unsettled me. "You must be Catherine," she said, stepping forward nervously. Her hands trembled slightly, though her smile was practiced. I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "I'm Judith," she replied. "I work with Timothy. He mentions you sometimes." "Mentions me sometimes." The words landed wrong. Timothy rarely spoke of his colleagues at all, and he certainly had never mentioned her name. I studied her carefully, searching for clues in her expression. She glanced around the store as though worried someone might see us talking. "Timothy told me about your anniversary party," she added, her voice too quick, too eager. "It sounds like it will be lovely." My pulse quickened. Timothy had been evasive about the celebration, insisting he preferred privacy. Why would he share details with her when he had barely shared them with me? How thoughtful of him, I said slowly, forcing my tone to remain polite. To talk about our marriage at work? Her smile faltered. Oh, he doesn't really discuss your marriage. He talks about other things, personal things. Her words trailed off, her eyes widening as if she realized she had revealed too much. The silence between us grew heavy. I could hear the hum of the refrigerators, the rustle of plastic bags, but everything else blurred into background noise. I should go, she stammered. It was nice meeting you, Catherine. And just like that, she hurried toward the exit, her heels clicking against the floor, her body language screaming urgency. I stood frozen in the produce section, my hand gripping a cucumber I had forgotten to place in the basket. Her words replayed in my mind. Personal things. What personal things would Timothy share with a woman he had never introduced to me? What secrets had already slipped between them? The encounter left me shaken. The number on the mysterious phone bill suddenly had a face. And that face had just fled the store like a guilty child caught in a lie. That evening, Timothy came home later than usual. His excuse was the same work, deadline stress. I watched him move through the kitchen, his eyes avoiding mine, his smile strained. I wanted to scream to demand answers about Judith, but the memory of his anger during our last confrontation held me back. Instead, I folded the grocery bags with trembling hands and kept my questions locked inside. But silence does not erase suspicion. It feeds it. And by then, suspicion had taken root, curling around every interaction, every absent glance, every late night. Before I go further, let me ask you something. If you ran into a woman who clearly knew more about your marriage than she should, would you confront her or your partner? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe secrets never protect love, hit subscribe now. Because these moments matter, they remind us that ignoring red flags only makes them louder later. Judith may have walked out of the grocery store that day, but she didn't walk out of my life. I would see her again. And next time she wouldn't be hiding behind nervous smiles. She would be standing proudly in my dining room wearing family heirlooms that had once been promised to me. And on that night, her presence would make clear what my in-laws truly thought of me. The following Sunday, I joined Timothy's family for dinner at their home, as I had so many times before. I told myself it would be routine, just another evening of forced smiles and quiet endurance. But that night the mask slipped. I finally heard the truth they usually dressed in silk and silver. We had just finished Sharon's meticulously prepared roast. I offered to help with dessert, hoping that by volunteering I might finally gain her approval. She handed me the task of fetching the crystal cake plates from the pantry. It seemed harmless, but that pantry was separated from the dining room by nothing more than a thin wall. As I reached for the plates, voices drifted through sharp and unfiltered. Catherine has proven herself incapable of fulfilling the most basic requirement of marriage, Sharon said, her tone clipped. 2 years without even a miscarriage to show for it. My hands froze on the shelf. The girl is defective, Mason replied with cruel finality. Timothy deserves better, a wife who can actually produce children instead of excuses. Their words sliced through me. I gripped the plate so hard my knuckles whitened my chest, heaving silently as their voices carried on. We need to find Timothy a more suitable wife, Sharon concluded. Someone younger, someone fertile, someone from a better family background. For a moment I couldn't breathe. These people who smiled at me across holiday tables, who toasted our anniversaries, who claimed to welcome me into their circle behind closed doors, they spoke of me like faulty merchandise to be returned. My vision blurred. The plates rattled in my trembling hands, threatening to shatter. I pressed my back against the pantry door, forcing my body still, though inside I was collapsing. When I finally stepped out, I carried the plates to the table with mechanical precision. My face a mask, my hands trembling so violently, the crystal chimed like wind chimes. Sharon looked up, her smile tight. Catherine, dear, you look pale. Are you feeling well? The false concern burned more than her insults. I nodded stiffly, setting the plates down. The room was filled with laughter, but it felt like mockery now. Every glance, every polite phrase was laced with venom I could suddenly hear clearly. Timothy sat among them in silence. He hadn't spoken a single word in my defense. His silence was louder than their cruelty, proof that he agreed. Or worse, proof that he didn't care enough to disagree. In that moment, something inside me cracked. Not a loud break, but a quiet fissure, the kind that changes the foundation forever. I excused myself to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My reflection stared back from the mirror, eyes rimmed with red face, pale lips, pressed tight to keep from sobbing. Through the thin walls, I still heard their voices dissecting my worth like judges handing down a sentence. 2 years should have been enough, Mason was saying. Enough to prove my value. Enough to produce an heir. Enough to avoid replacement. My hands pressed against the counter, gripping it for strength. I wanted to scream, to storm out, to end it all right there. But instead, I fixed my face, smoothed my dress, and returned to the table. Because back then, I still believed endurance could earn love. Let me pause here. Have you ever overheard words not meant for your ears? Words that changed how you saw everything? Would you have confronted them in that moment, or stayed silent like I did? Share in the comments. And if you believe no one deserves to be spoken of, like broken property, hit subscribe now. These stories need to reach the people who feel alone in their battles. That night taught me the truth. I was not a daughter-in-law to them. I was a placeholder, a test subject, a failed experiment. And though I tried to bury that pain under preparations for our anniversary, the echo of their cruelty followed me. When the night of the party came, I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea just how far they were willing to go to erase me. 2 days before the anniversary dinner, I found myself sitting in a fertility clinic, the air sterile and humming with fluorescent lights. Erica insisted on driving me there. She said I needed answers, not more guesses and guilt. The waiting room was decorated with posters of smiling mothers holding chubby babies, a cruel contrast to the weight pressing down on my chest. Every image whispered what I hadn't been able to give. Every photo reminded me of the accusations I had overheard from Mason and Sharon. Just think, Erica whispered, squeezing my hand as we sat together. By Thursday, you might finally have the answers you've been searching for. I nodded, though my throat was too tight for words. Dr. Patterson greeted us with a calm, steady smile. She was a woman in her 50s who had delivered half the babies in our town. Her presence was warm, but professional. She asked me questions that felt more like confessions. How long had we been trying? 2 years. Any pregnancies? None. Did I feel stress in my marriage? My hand hesitated over the form, then checked the box marked sometimes. Inside the exam room, pastel walls did nothing to soften the sharp reality of why I was there. I lay back on the table while Dr. Patterson pressed gently against my abdomen. "Tell me about your stress levels, Catherine," she said. "Normal," I whispered. "Just the usual pressures of married life." "Are you happy in your marriage?" The question landed like a stone in my chest. I opened my mouth to answer, but silence betrayed me first. Erica, sitting nearby, reached for my hand. Her grip was steady, mine trembling. "Yes," I said finally, though the uncertainty in my voice exposed me. Blood was drawn, 3 vials, each one pulling away what little hope I still clung to. As the needle pierced my skin, I thought, this is my last chance. My last defense against the verdict, already waiting at Mason's table. "The results will be ready in 48 hours, Dr. Patterson assured me. 48 hours. Just enough time for a family to deliver their own judgment. On the drive home, Erica filled the silence with optimism. "No matter what those results say, you'll be okay. You're stronger than you know. And if the news is good," she smiled, "then we'll see who's really unfit to be part of this family." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to that flicker of hope. But Timothy had grown more distant with each passing day. When I tried to share my fears, he brushed them aside. When I spoke of options, he shut me down. He seemed less like a partner and more like a man waiting for a sentence to be carried out. Still, I clung to the thought of those results. I clung to the possibility that a single piece of paper could silence the whispers, shut down the comparisons, and restore my place at the table. But life rarely waits for perfect timing. The verdict of my in-laws arrived before the truth in my blood had time to reach me. And when the party began, they thought they held all the cards. They thought the evaluation was over, the decision made. They had no idea that Erica carried those results in her purse. No idea that their cruelty would collide with a truth powerful enough to shatter their entire performance. Let me ask you something. Would you cling to hope while waiting for results or prepare for the worst? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe no one should be judged on their ability to conceive, subscribe now. Together we challenge the standards that still chain too many women. That night, Mason thought he controlled the narrative. But in reality, destiny had already written a twist he could not see coming. 3 nights after the appointment, I decided to confront Timothy directly. I had brochures from the clinic spread across our bed, colorful pamphlets outlining treatment options, success stories, medical solutions. I thought if I presented him with hope, maybe he would meet me halfway. When he walked into the bedroom loosening his tie, I looked up with a nervous smile. Timothy, I've been thinking about what Dr. Patterson said. There are options we haven't tried yet, treatments that could help us conceive. For a brief moment, I thought he might soften. Instead, his expression hardened, his eyes narrowing with something closer to disdain than fatigue. Maybe we're not meant to have children together, Catherine, he said coldly. The words struck me like a blow to the chest. My throat closed, my vision blurred. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying, he continued, that perhaps this marriage was a mistake from the beginning. Maybe we've been forcing something that was never meant to work. I stared at him, unable to breathe. This man, my husband, the person I had trusted with my dreams, was unraveling our vows as if they were nothing but paper. Is there someone else? I asked, my voice cracking. His silence was louder than a confession. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Finally, he muttered, I think I should sleep in the guest room tonight. We both need space to think. The click of the door behind him was the sound of a marriage breaking. I sat alone on our bed, surrounded by brochures that now looked like scraps of false hope. Treatments, procedures, possibilities, none of it mattered if the man beside me had already left in his heart. The next morning he avoided me. His words were clipped, his movements mechanical. The gap between us widened into a canyon. He carried himself like someone waiting for an exit, not a solution. I tried to hold on, tried to pretend his words had been spoken in frustration, not truth. But deep down, I knew. His silence was deliberate. His distance was intentional. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing his face. At dinner with his parents that weekend, the reality became even clearer. They spoke openly, casually about grandchildren other families were enjoying. Sharon smiled as she compared me to younger women, fertile women. Timothy sat beside me saying nothing, not one word in my defense. It was then I understood this wasn't just Timothy's choice. It was a family decision. They had judged me, found me wanting, and he had accepted the verdict. That night, lying awake in our bed while Timothy slept in the guest room, I realized something important. A marriage can survive infertility, it can survive financial stress, even disappointment, but it cannot survive betrayal. It cannot survive silence when you need a voice. It cannot survive when one partner has already decided to walk away. Pause with me for a moment. If the person you loved looked you in the eye and told you your marriage was a mistake, what would you do? Would you fight harder or walk away? Share in the comments. And if you believe no one deserves to be discarded like a failed experiment, subscribe now. Your voice matters here. That night, Timothy thought he was creating distance. What he didn't know was that he was also creating clarity. His words stripped away the last illusions I had about us. And in that clarity, I began to see the truth. My fight wasn't to save a marriage already dead. My fight was to save myself. The night of our anniversary dinner should have been a celebration. Instead, it became my public trial. As dessert was being served, Mason rose from his chair. The room quieted instantly. Even the soft music faded into the background as though the entire house was holding its breath. He adjusted his jacket with the confidence of a judge about to deliver a final verdict. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his booming voice commanding the room. We are here tonight not only to honor Timothy and Catherine's 2 years of marriage, but also to address important family matters. My fork stilled against the china. A chill slid down my spine. I glanced at Timothy, but he refused to meet my eyes. Mason reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope embossed with the logo of a law firm. He held it aloft like evidence before a jury. Marriage, he continued, is an institution with specific purposes. When those purposes are not fulfilled within a reasonable time, difficult decisions must be made. Gasps rippled through the guests. My stomach twisted. I wanted to run, but my body felt anchored to the chair. Mason's eyes locked onto mine. Since you could not provide us with an heir, Catherine, here is your anniversary gift. He extended the envelope across the table. My hand shook as I accepted it. The paper was thick, expensive, heavy with finality. Sharon leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Open it, dear. We're all eager to see your reaction. The room leaned in as I broke the seal. My vision blurred as I read the first line aloud. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers. Signed by Timothy. Filed weeks earlier. The words sliced through me like steel. I looked to my husband, my partner of 2 years, the man I had built my life around. He stood pale and rigid beside his father's eyes, fixed on the floor. Not once did he look at me. Not once did he speak in my defense. Tears stung my eyes as Sharon clapped her hands together lightly as though unveiling a new centerpiece. And now she said brightly, "We'd like you to meet someone very special." From the doorway, Judith stepped forward. She wore a silk dress that shimmered in the candlelight, her hair styled flawlessly. My heart dropped. The young woman from the grocery store, the one Timothy had never mentioned. Sharon's voice rang with delight. "This is Judith, Timothy's fiancée. They plan to marry as soon as the divorce is finalized." The words echoed in my ears, fiancée, while I was still legally his wife. Judith smiled, her hand brushing the delicate pearl earrings dangling from her ears. My pearl earrings. Family heirlooms promised to me now, adorning my replacement. The dining room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, the divorce papers trembling in my hand. Around me, some guests watched with pity, others with thinly veiled fascination, as if they had paid for tickets to witness my destruction. Mason smiled triumphantly as though the matter were settled. "You need only sign Catherine. Make it official. We can make this easy for everyone." Easy, as if betrayal in front of 45 witnesses could ever be easy. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers in his face, to call out every cruel deception. Instead, my body moved on autopilot. I picked up the pen Mason offered. The weight of it was unbearable. With tears blurring my vision, I pressed it to the page and scrawled my name. The scratching of ink was louder than the murmurs, louder than my own heartbeat. In that moment, I wasn't a wife. I was a performance, a lesson, a scapegoat sacrificed so Timothy and his family could secure their legacy. Pause with me here. If you were in my place faced with betrayal so public, so deliberate, would you have signed those papers? Or would you have walked away without giving them the satisfaction? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe no woman should ever be humiliated this way, subscribe. Together, we shine a light on stories they'd rather keep in the dark. That night, my marriage ended, not in a courthouse, but in a dining room. Not in privacy, but in spectacle. And though I thought the humiliation was complete, the truth had not yet been revealed. A single envelope waiting in Erica's purse would soon change everything. The ink had barely dried on my signature when the room erupted. Applause, laughter, toasts raised to Timothy and his new future. It felt like a cruel carnival, a grotesque celebration of my destruction. I sat frozen in my chair, my hand still clutching the pen as though it had burned me. My vision blurred with tears. I could hear voices congratulating Timothy, praising Judith's beauty, even joking about how quickly they should set a date. My humiliation was not just complete, it was entertainment. Timothy finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "It's done. We can move forward now." Move forward. The words echoed in my head, hollow and brutal. Move forward with another woman. Move forward with the life we were supposed to share. Move forward as if I had never existed. My chest ached so fiercely I thought I might collapse. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the papers apart. But surrounded by 45 guests, some pitying, some eager to watch, I forced myself into silence. I refused to give them more of my pain. That's when I heard it. A single voice that cut through the noise like a blade. Not so fast. Erica. She rose from her chair, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with fury. The applause faltered, then died completely. All heads turned toward her. She clutched her purse tightly, her shoulders squared. I had never seen her look so fierce, so unshakable. If we're exchanging gifts tonight, she said clearly, then I have one too. Mason frowned, his smug expression cracking. Sharon shifted in her seat, unease flashing across her face. Timothy stiffened, his glass of wine trembling in his hand. Erica stepped forward, her heels striking the hardwood with deliberate force. She stopped at the head of the table directly opposite Mason and set her purse down. Slowly, she withdrew a white envelope, plain ordinary, but the way she held it made it feel heavier than stone. The room held its breath. Sharon tried to smile, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Erica, dear, this isn't the time. This Erica interrupted, her voice sharp, as glass is exactly the time. Gasps rippled around the room. She laid the envelope on the table in front of Mason, her eyes never leaving his. You thought you had all the facts before staging this performance, but you didn't. Mason's hand twitched as he reached for the envelope. The same man who had minutes earlier orchestrated my downfall now looked unsure. His confidence wavered. His fingers shook as he tore the flap open. The silence was suffocating. Guests leaned forward, desperate to see what secret could unravel this carefully staged victory. Mason pulled out a single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the words, and then his face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The man who had gloated over my humiliation now looked as though he had swallowed poison. Sharon leaned toward him, panic in her eyes. What does it say? The paper rattled in his trembling hands. Finally, his voice cracked. It's a pregnancy test. The room gasped as one. Erica's voice rang out clear and merciless. Confirmed by a blood test 48 hours ago. Catherine is pregnant. She's carrying the grandchild you just threw away. My heart stuttered. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, like a wave crashing against a seawall, strength surged through me. I lifted my head, my tears drying into steel. Congratulations, I said coldly, looking Mason straight in the eye. You just gave away your grandchild. The room was silent. No applause, no laughter. Only shock, shame, and the undeniable truth settling over them like a storm cloud. Before I continue, let me ask you, if you had been sitting at that table, would you have spoken up like Erica, or stayed silent with the rest? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe no woman should ever have her worth reduced to her ability to conceive, subscribe. These stories matter, and your voice helps them reach others who need to hear them. That night, my humiliation turned into revelation, and the family who believed they had erased me had just destroyed themselves instead. The moment Erica's words pierced the air, the dining room froze. It was as if time itself held its breath. Positive, she repeated, her voice cutting through the silence. Catherine is pregnant. The heir you claimed she could never provide already exists, growing inside her right now. The faces around the table transformed in an instant. Guests who had been clapping minutes earlier now stared in stunned horror. Judith, dressed like a queen, in silk and pearls, shrank into her chair. Sharon's triumphant glow drained into ash. And Mason, the great patriarch, the orchestrator of my humiliation, looked as though he had just watched his empire crumble to dust. My hands no longer trembled. My tears no longer blurred my vision. A strange calm washed over me, the kind that comes when you realize you've already lost everything, so there's nothing left to fear. I pushed back my chair slowly, the scrape of wood against hardwood echoing like thunder in the silence. I looked directly at Mason, my voice steady, every word deliberate. Congratulations. You just gave away your grandchild. The shift in power was immediate, palpable. Mason's hand, still clutching the test results, trembled so hard the paper rustled like dry leaves. His booming voice, always so confident, cracked into a whisper. Catherine, we didn't know. We had no idea. You didn't ask, I snapped, my voice sharper than I had ever heard it. You judged. You condemned. You staged my execution before verifying the truth. Sharon stumbled to her feet, desperation lacing her words. This is all a terrible mistake, an unfortunate timing issue. We can fix this. Fix, I repeated, my laughter cold and humorless. You humiliated me in front of 45 witnesses. You introduced my husband's fiancé before the ink on my divorce papers was dry. Fix what, Sharon? My dignity, my child's place in this family, or the fact that you exposed yourselves as cruel beyond measure. Judith fidgeted with her earrings, her earlier pride gone. She looked at Timothy, searching his face for reassurance, but he couldn't even meet her eyes. His silence condemned them both. Finally, Timothy spoke, his voice trembling. "Catherine, please. We can work this out. The papers don't have to be filed. We can—" "Work what out?" I cut him off. "Your marriage to me, which you just ended, or your engagement to Judith, which you announced tonight. Which promise do you intend to honor, Timothy, because you can't have both?" He faltered, no answer on his lips. Mason leaned forward. His pride shattered his voice a plea. "Catherine, please. Think of the child. Think of our grandchild." I straightened my back, every ounce of weakness burned away by rage and clarity. "My child will never know a family that discarded him before he was even born. You wanted heirs, not humans. Legacies, not love. You don't deserve him." The dining room, once filled with laughter and music, now felt like a tomb. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, avoiding my gaze, ashamed of their silence. Erica stepped beside me, her arm brushing mine, a steadying presence. "Come on," she whispered. "You've made your point. Let's leave them in their ruins." I looked at the table one last time, the crystal glasses, the roses, the papers bearing my signature. And then I looked at the faces of those who had judged me and found me disposable. "I was never disposable," I said clearly. "You just proved how unworthy you are of me." Then I turned my back on them all. Pause here with me. If you had the chance to walk away from those who betrayed you, would you take it? Or would you stay and fight to be accepted? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe true power comes from walking away, subscribe. This community exists to remind us that dignity matters more than approval. That night the power shifted. I was no longer their victim. I was free. The room dissolved into chaos the moment I stood my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. Mason's commanding voice cracked as he stumbled to his feet. "Catherine, wait, we can fix this. The papers don't have to be filed. We can tear them up right now." His hands shook as he reached across the table as though he could physically pull me back into their world. "Fix what I demanded," my voice steady, though my chest burned with fury. "Fix the legal documents I just signed in front of 45 witnesses. Fix the humiliation you orchestrated for your own amusement. Fix the way you paraded Judith in front of me as Timothy's new wife while I still wore his ring." The silence that followed was deafening. All around the table, faces shifted from pity to shame. Even those who had clapped minutes earlier now lowered their eyes. Timothy finally found his voice, desperation spilling from him. "Catherine, please. We can work this out. The papers don't have to mean anything. We can start again. For the baby." "For the baby," I repeated, my laughter hollow. "You mean the baby you all declared would never exist? The child you dismissed before you even knew he was real? No, Timothy. This child deserves better than a father who chose cowardice and silence." Judith shrank into her chair, the triumph she had carried into the room now replaced with shame. She toyed nervously with the pearl earrings, my earrings dangling from her ears. For once, she looked like what she truly was, a pawn in a cruel game orchestrated by Mason and Sharon. Sharon's voice rose next, high-pitched and trembling. "Catherine, dear, families have misunderstandings. This can be repaired. Think about what's best for your child. Think about his future with us." I turned toward her, my voice sharp as glass. "What's best for my child is to never know the family that discarded him before he was even born. What's best for him is to grow up free of your conditions, your judgments, your cruelty." Mason's face was crimson now, his arrogance burned away. He looked older, smaller, as if the weight of his choices had crushed him in a single night. "Catherine, please," he begged. "You must understand we thought we were doing what was best." "You thought wrong," I said simply. "You thought you could treat me like merchandise, replace me with a younger, more fertile model, humiliate me for your entertainment, but you miscalculated. You just gave away your grandchild." The words struck like thunder. Sharon flinched. Timothy's face paled. Judith looked as though she wished the floor would open beneath her feet. I took a slow breath, then turned my back to them all. "Enjoy your dinner," I said coldly. "Enjoy the legacy you thought you secured. Because from this night forward, my child and I will not be part of it." Erica appeared at my side, her arm slipping through mine. Let's go, she whispered, her voice gentle but resolute. I walked toward the door, my steps deliberate, every movement, a declaration of strength. Behind me, Mason's voice cracked with panic. You can't do this. You can't take our grandchild away from us. I stopped at the threshold, turning back one final time. My voice was calm, unshaken. I'm not taking him away. You gave him away when you handed me those divorce papers. And with that, I walked out. The air outside hit me like a blessing, cool and clean after the suffocating stench of betrayal inside. Each step toward the waiting car felt lighter, freer. For the first time in months, I wasn't begging for approval or carrying shame that wasn't mine. I was walking toward freedom with my head high and my dignity intact. Pause with me here. If you were in my place, would you have stayed and fought or walked out and never looked back? Share your answer in the comments. And if you believe leaving toxic people is the greatest act of power, subscribe now. Together we remind each other that dignity is non-negotiable. That night, I walked away from a marriage, from a family, from chains disguised as tradition. And though my heart was heavy, my spirit had never felt lighter. The October night air wrapped around me like a balm, cool and liberating after the suffocating atmosphere of that dining room. Erica guided me toward her car, her hand firm around mine, her presence steady as an anchor. Behind us, the house buzzed with chaos, raised voices, desperate pleas, the sound of a family realizing too late that they had lost everything. Don't look back, Erica whispered. Don't give them the satisfaction. I kept my eyes forward, my steps measured. The porch lights of neighboring homes glowed warmly as though reminding me that not every family was cruel, not every table was poisoned by arrogance. By the time we reached her car, my chest loosened. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Timothy's voice carried faintly through the night air. Catherine, please don't do this. But his words came too late. I slid into the passenger seat, closing the door with a click that sounded more final than the scrape of a pen on divorce papers. As Erica pulled away, silence filled the car. Not the heavy silence I had endured with Timothy, but a comforting quiet that said, "You're safe now." Jazz played softly on her radio, the notes mingling with the faint scent of her vanilla perfume. And then the dam inside me broke. I sobbed. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook my body and left me gasping for air. 2 years of betrayal, of silent humiliation, of enduring judgment. I released it all in waves that seemed endless. Erica kept one hand on the wheel and the other on mine. "Let it out," she murmured. "You've carried this weight far too long." I cried until exhaustion dulled the edges of grief. Then through ragged breaths, I whispered, "You saved me. If you hadn't been there tonight." "You would have saved yourself," she interrupted firmly. "You're stronger than they ever believed, stronger than you've allowed yourself to see." Her words planted a seed in me. Even through the wreckage, I began to see a faint outline of something new, something that belonged only to me. When we reached my house, the porch light was still on, casting familiar shadows across the yard. It no longer looked like a home shared with Timothy. It looked like a sanctuary waiting to be reclaimed. Erica carried my overnight bag inside her, energy filling the silence that had once suffocated me. I sat on the couch, the same one where Timothy and I had once watched movies together. It felt different now, not a reminder of what I had lost, but a space where I could rebuild, a space where my child and I could begin again. I called my mother that night. Words poured out about the phone bills, the cruel remarks, the staged humiliation, and finally the revelation of my pregnancy. She listened without interruption, her tears audible in her voice when she finally spoke. "My child," she whispered, "you deserve joy, and that baby will have a family who loves him unconditionally. Come stay with me, let me help." For the first time in months, I felt genuine relief. Not because Timothy's family had been exposed, but because I realized I no longer needed them. As the weeks passed, my mother moved in to help prepare for the baby. Erica became more than a friend, she became an aunt in spirit. My house transformed into a place of hope. Walls once heavy with judgment now echoed with laughter, with baby shower decorations, with whispered prayers for a new life. Timothy tried reaching out, but his words never touched me again. The signed papers were more than legal documents, they were my shield. Proof that I had walked away and would not return. Let me ask you, if you had been me, would you have given Timothy another chance for the sake of the child? Or would you have walked away as I did? Share your answer below. And if you believe leaving toxic legacies is the path to true freedom, subscribe now. This community is proof we are never alone when we choose dignity. That night, I thought my story had ended in shame. But walking out of that house was not an ending, it was a beginning. The beginning of a new life, not just for me, but for the child who had already given me more strength than I thought I possessed. Years have passed since that night of betrayal, but its shadows no longer haunt me. Instead, they serve as reminders of the strength I discovered when I was forced to walk away. My son David is now 4 years old. His laughter fills our home like sunlight through open windows. He chases butterflies in the garden, his little feet pattering across the grass, his voice bursting with joy. He knows nothing of the grandparents who rejected him before his first breath. He knows only love, mine, my mother's, and Erica's. Our house has become a sanctuary of chosen family. My mother reads David bedtime stories every night, her voice steady and soothing. Erica spoils him with books and toys, her presence proof that true loyalty is chosen, not inherited. And me, I've learned to stand tall, to trust my instincts, to protect my joy fiercely. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what Timothy thinks now, whether regret gnaws at him when he remembers the night his family lost everything in a single envelope. But those thoughts don't stay long, because the truth is, I don't need his regret. I don't need their approval. I never did. The revenge I found was not loud or cruel. It was simple living well. Raising a child in freedom rather than chains. Building a life where love is unconditional, where dignity is never negotiable, where no one's worth is measured by anyone else's expectations. And so as I watch David play in the garden, I understand the lesson betrayal carved into me. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what truly matters. The best revenge is not destruction. The best revenge is peace.